It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Terry Wright. Terry is a garden member, garden supporter. He has had a prolific career in engineering and finance, but he is now an art collector and art dealer of Charley Harper's art. And so he started working with us about this exhibit, and we've just had so much fun with this exhibition. I know we have had to reschedule this event multiple times. So, thank you for your grace and support as we continue to build back after 2 back-to-back hurricanes. I hope each and every one of you and your families were safe. Hopefully it was only just a little bit of yard damage, and if that's the case, come on out to our plant sale Saturday and you can get some more plants. So we thank you for being here tonight. Terry's got a very interesting presentation, so you can really learn about the life and art of Charley Harper and how he got involved in this. So let's give Terry a warm welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Before I start my talk, let me just say what a fabulous asset the garden is. Isn't it that a town our size, Punta Gorda, has a fabulous botanical garden like this? Isn't it fabulous? And aren't you fabulous for making it possible? Signals here telling me I need to put the microphone closer to my mouth. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay. Again, thank you for your gardens. These events are a thank you and a way for the gardens to say thank you for supporting them for so long and making everything possible. Events like this possible, the exhibitions, the wonderful merchandise in the gift shop possible, and of course the surroundings that we have here. So let's have a round of applause. Aren't they great? First career. This is my second act here as after retirement, and it all happened by accident. It all happened by accident. The way that I became aware of Charley was in Costa Rica. And basically, birds, that's a hobby, watching exotic birds. And came to the end, and there's a little gift. This poster right here was in the gift shop, and I took one look at it, and I was captivated by it. If you know anything about birds in Costa Rica, you'll recognize this as the quetzal. It's the one bird, the signature bird of Costa Rica. Everybody who's a bird watcher has to see that bird when they go to Costa Rica. This fabulous. Going on. It's got trogons, it's got all these migratory birds like Baltimore orioles, it's got black and white warblers, it's got coatimundis, it's got butterflies, it's got monkeys, it's got manakins, there's another kind of bird, it's got a motmot, which is a beautiful bird, bee eaters. All kinds. And down here you can see this was a benefit poster for the Monteverde Cloud Forest, and they have an educational organization, the Cloud Forest School Foundation in Sewanee. So I had never heard of this artist before. I wrote to them and said, touch with him. And no, I didn't hear back anything. Nothing. A year later, I get a letter. Organization. They said, oh, the artist is Charley Harper. He lives in Ohio. He's a regional artist, blah, blah, blah. So I don't remember how I got his phone number, and I called up his art studio. Yeah, I wonder if I could speak with Charley. And there was a pause. There was a short pause. Finally, the gentleman who answered, who I was talking to, said, well, I'm sorry to tell you this, Charley just died last. So I've never met Charley Harper. I'm not Charley Harper. That's a mistake that make even today. They'll say, "Hey, Charley," you know. But I've never met Charley Harper. Friends with his son, and his son had taken on furthering his dad. Since 2007, there have been 3 or 4 books written about Charley Harper. Artwork continues to be disseminated throughout the world. Charley had about 6 produced, has not been published or has been published in obscure places, and his son now has taken over the mantle of his father's art studio and merchandised it. So he licenses the artwork through all kinds of different channels and sells the original artwork as well, and that's what we do. We help his son further his dad's legacy. So what I'm gonna share with you today is a little bit about Charley Harper, who he was. The early part of his career was really formative, and I think one of the most interesting parts of his life. And so we're going to talk about that. And in that context, we're going to talk about the Ford Times prints. And I'm sure everybody knows Ford. That is the same Ford that makes cars. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But Charley started his career working for the Ford Times magazine, which was owned by the Ford Times Motor Company. And it all makes sense. I'll explain it. So Charley was born in 1922 in Frenchton, West Virginia. And he was a carefree kid. He loved running through the countryside, you know, observing birds, animals, fish, whatever. Had a carefree childhood. Professed to have an aversion to hard work. He grew up on a farm, and a lot of that work is hard work, hard manual work. As a young man, he served in the Army, the U.S. Army. He was a recon artist. So when he was in the Army, he would go to forward positions and make sketches of everything from bombed out buildings, other soldiers, positions of enemy troops, that kind of thing. That's what he did in the Army. He came back and he went to the Cincinnati Art School. And then when he graduated, he married his girlfriend, and they embarked on a trip around the country. They won a scholarship, or he won a scholarship, a fellowship, and that provided the funds for them to do that. And so they got to see a lot of the national parks and a lot of the really exciting places, beautiful places that are part of the United States. So over the course of his career, he's had many, many interesting illustrative engagements. And we're going to talk about the Ford Times, but he also illustrated Betty Crocker's Dinner for Two cookbook. Everybody in this room may have heard of that, right? But you never knew who draw those little doodles on the recipes, all the cute little chickens and everything else that are in the side pages. When I was about 8 years old, maybe 10, I had a book. I completely forgot about it. It was called The Golden Book of Biology. And I think it was my dad was cleaning out his house, and he was kind of a pack rat. So he had just tons and tons of stuff that had accumulated. I'm the oldest of 6, so there were 6 of us kids and our parents. And so we had lots of stuff. And he was cleaning out the house, and I found this book. I had seen his book. I guess my pointer's not working. Sorry, but The Golden Book of Biology. I had seen that or had that book when I was a kid, and it's really a beautiful book. Animal Kingdom's even better. Animal Kingdom is a book that he wrote in 1968. or he illustrated in 1968. A lot of the artwork that's being published now is from that book, and some of his best work. Another book is called Birds and Words. That's a compilation of his 4 times, yes, his 4 times work. So here's somebody already has that book. He illustrated Hallmark cards, and there's a whole series of cards that he illustrated that are really quite amusing, and they revolve around Christmas. So there are all these different cards of Santa in various acts of repairing the sleigh or trying to get down the chimney that he's too chubby to get down, or, you know, they're really humorous and they're great. But he illustrated cards. And as he became more famous and known and the referrals came in, he got a lot of important commissions. And you can see some of them in the gift shop, particularly the National Park Service. And the posters that he did for the National Park Service, there's 10 of them. They're just fabulous. For my money, they're the most exciting and vibrant and beautiful of all his work because there's so much in them. Just like the Monteverdi poster, there's so much in them. Animals, insects, birds, places, all kinds of things. And the National Park Service has had commissioned them, 10 of them. And you can see them in the gift shop. You should go see them. There are some really great ones, including some that have to do with southern Florida. We talked about the Monteverdi Cloud Forest, but he's also done work for the Audubon Society, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and the Florida Conservancy. There's the banner behind you as you come in by the circle there. That's a piece of his work for Florida Wilderness Society, and it's kind of indicative of his style. So he had this long 60-year career, and the 4 times is really just the beginning of it. Now, why is he famous? What is he known for? He has a unique style. He has a unique artistic style. He kind of invented it. He calls it minimal realism. Minimal realism. So minimalism, it's a reductive kind of process. You take out the detail, it's an abstraction. A realism is that he retains the essence of the subject, whether it's a bird, an insect, a fish, a place, an object, whatever. You can instantly recognize what it is, even without the detail. So that's the essence of minimal realism, and he coined that term, minimal realism. There really aren't too many people that are using that term, except him. He said he's the only wildlife artist never to be compared to Audubon. Now, if you've ever seen an Audubon print, you'll remember that they're just chock full of details, right? Because what Audubon was trying to do was create an image of a bird, let's say, that was as true to life as he could make it. He tried to give the bird dimensionality. He tried to make it as realistic as a photograph. He not only looked at the feathers on the wing, but he'd look at the veins in the feathers, and the amount of detail is incredible. And that's what he was striving for, is an incredible amount of detail that would be like a photograph. Charley didn't do that. Charley went a different way. He said, when I look at a wildlife or nature subject, I do not see the feathers in the wings, I just count the wings. So there he's telling you, he's really abandoning and going in the opposite direction of Audubon. And so that's why he's never been compared to Audubon. I reduce the subject to the simplest possible visual terms without losing identity. That's key, without losing identity, thereby enhancing identity. So he's taking out all the stuff that just visually confuses you. He's taking out all the details that don't help you understand what you're looking at. So that's really what he's famous for, and why he says he's never been compared to Audubon. So let me explain again what I mean. On the left-hand side is a trumpeter swan. It's a famous John James Audubon etching, a print. And if you look closely at this, you'll see incredible detail. You'll see not only all the feathers on the wings, you'll see, the detail in the beak, in the neck, the feet, and even within a feather, there's a lot of detail about the veins of the feather and so forth. But really, what is a trumpeter swan? It's a big white bird with a black bill, right? That's what Charley drew. So that's Charley's version, and I think it's a great example of minimal realism. A big white bird with a black bill. You can tell instantly it's a trumpeter swan. It's not a mute swan, it's a trumpeter swan. So that's his style. You can see the details removed, so it's a minimalistic style, right? There's some abstraction, right? I mean, look at the legs. They don't really look anything like realistic legs, but you're not going to identify a swan by its legs. But he's retained the essence of the trumpeter swan, right? Big white bird, long curvy neck, and a black bill. That's really what makes it a trumpeter swan, and that's what he's captured. All right, so now we've talked about what Charley's style was. Let's talk about how he got there. And I mentioned before that he worked for the Ford Times magazine. Now, the Ford Times magazine was a magazine, and oh, before I forget, I brought some show and tell. I'm going to pass these around. Just keep them going around because that's really what this talk is about. Oops, what happened here? So this was a monthly travel magazine. It was published by the Ford Motor Company under the Ford Times label. It was published between the 1940s and the 1980s. And in that time frame, people were coming back from the war. They had increased disposable income. The U.S. highway system was being developed. And the motor companies now were not making tanks, they're making cars. So Ford wanted to, of course, sell as many cars as they could. And they came up with this idea, we'll create a travel magazine, and we will use that as a vehicle to give people ideas and encourage them to travel around the country in their cars. So, as I said, this was happening, just prior to and coincident with the development of the interstate highway system, rising middle class influence, and people were really starting to take vacations. Middle class was starting to take vacations. So the Ford Times magazine engaged travel and feature writers along with artists, including Charley. So this was really his first job. He was an illustrator and he worked for this magazine. And this is one of the covers. I think that might be his second cover in 1952. That's the Grand Canyon. We'll talk about that one in a minute. That's that print over there, the Grand Canyon. So as you see, when the magazines come around, there's a wide range of articles, and they're all pretty much following this formulaic contents. They have travel stories, they have stories about interesting places and events, towns, natural wonders, the desert or the Yellowstone or whatever. State and national parks all around the country, fairs and expositions. They had a feature section where if you were going to go to Cincinnati or you're going to go to Atlanta, they would feature a restaurant and provide recipes, local recipes in the magazine. Nature and outdoors were a big feature, recreation, and general interest. So there's a lot of stuff, and a few ads too. So where did Charley start? He started at the bottom, just like you might expect. A young kid, just out of art school, and he'd been away from school for a while because he was taking this trip around the country, but he came in at the bottom of the ladder here. He was not the most famous artist. He was an unknown artist, young kid. And so they put him to work doing probably the least glamorous thing in the magazine. And that was illustrating this section, which is the restaurant section. So this is actually his first contribution to the magazine. He illustrated this restaurant. And, to be honest, it's really not much to look at, is it? So you see here they're talking about the Skyline restaurant, And they have some salad dressing recipe next to it, and that's how we started. Real humble beginnings, right? And that was in 1948. A month later, it becomes 1949, and he illustrates his first story. So he's moving up the ladder just a little bit. And this story is called a one-picture story. So it's not this big, lengthy article, and it's nothing really spectacular. And again, the illustration is really not too much to look at, right? It doesn't really knock your socks off. But that's it. That was his picture. And I guess the most notable thing about this is that minimal realism style hasn't really emerged yet. That's not really what this is. So he still hasn't figured out what he's going to do. He hasn't figured out how he's going to represent nature in 1949. For the next 2 years, 1949, 1950, he did more recipe illustrations, you know, so he's still not one of the hot shots. And he's illustrating other writers' works. He illustrated this article, Ohio's Roadside Parks. And you can see this cartoonish kind of thing on the left-hand side. He's moving in that direction, you know, where we can see him end up. But he's not there yet. Same thing on the right. So this is still 1950-ish. In 1951, Charley gets his first cover. His first cover illustration is this one. And inside, he also illustrates an article called Cincinnati Pay Lakes. So evidently, back in the 50s, all these farmers around Cincinnati in the 1950s, they'd dig a hole in their back 40, they'd fill it with water, they'd stock it with fish, and then they'd charge people to come and go fishing in their lake, Pay Lake. But the real thing that was interesting is this cover, because now we can see that he is moved quite a bit in the direction. He's starting to settle into this minimalism kind of style, right? He's got all these fish, and there's not a lot of detail, and the detail that you see are just these squiggly lines and so forth. But you can almost instantly recognize these fish, right? There's a muskellunge or a pike up in the upper left. There's a pumpkin seed or bluegill in the upper right. There's a largemouth bass. There's a crappie. And I'm not sure what this one is down here, some kind of catfish or something. But it's pretty obvious what they are, right? Without titles or anything else. Just the shape and color really gives you your best clues as to what they are. So he's almost there. He's kind of settled in on this style. And he got a lot of feedback. The magazine got a lot of feedback from that article. A lot of positive feedback. So a year later, this is 1952 now, they have this article they call 8 Familiar Fish. And what they say is, Mr. Harper painted the watercolors illustrating the fishing story Cincinnati Pay Lakes, which appeared in the April 1951 Ford Times. These paintings received so much favorable comment that both artist and topic seemed ideal for the current experimental series. So what they did for the first time was they created a series of paintings for the magazine, all under one article, and they made these available for sale. So Charley made the originals, they printed them up for the article, this experimental series of 8 fish, and then he went home at night and he made prints, silkscreen prints in his garage. And he hand pulled these prints and he sold them for, I think it's $5 a piece. Yeah, $5 a piece. So for $5 you could buy the largemouth bass, you could buy the king salmon, you could buy the catfish, perch, whatever. And that's how he got started as a printmaker. Because people would write to the magazine and they would say, hey, I really like the muskie, I really like the perch, I really like this, that. Here's my $5, please send me that print. And that's what he did. It was a side hustle. It was a gig job that started in 1952, and it all kind of started because of that cover that he did the year before. So now he's off and running. Now he's a printmaker as well as an illustrator. And the, well, I'll tell you in a minute that this was a formula that they repeated over and over. But before I do that, I want to tell you how he made these prints, because they're really kind of interesting. So, in the beginning, for the publication, he needs to make the original print. He needs to make the master copy. So before he can make the silkscreen copy, before they can reduce it for the magazine, he has to have the original. He has to make the original. And what Charley did was kind of clever. You wouldn't expect this of an artist, but really he's an illustrator, which is a little different from an artist. They're a little more practical than an artist. An artist is kind of free-flowing and maybe not as analytical and maybe not as practical, more free spirit. He was not quite that. He was more on the practical side. So the way he made these things is he'd start with a piece of paper and he'd paint an object, in this case a fish, a rainbow trout. And, rainbow trout. And then he'd cut it out. And he'd cut out some other pieces too. He'd paint some other pieces. And he'd take these things and he'd rearrange them on the page. And when he liked what he had, when he liked the final layout, what he would do is he'd glue them down, and then he'd paint all these embellishments directly on that sheet. And that's what we have right over here. This is one of the originals, the masters, from the 4 times fish series. And what you can see is that if you look closely, come up here later and look closely, you see that the fish is a cutout image. So this is like a collage over here. He's painted this separately, cut it out, and then glued it down. Same thing with some of these swirls that you see, these blue and white things that make you think that suggest motion, right? They suggest motion. And so he's cut these out, he's glued them down, and then where you see the yellow arrows, he's actually painted these embellishments on top of the cutout images. So he's painted the fins, he's painted this fish fly, the fly here, he's painted the landing net. Those things are all added afterwards. So he starts with the main elements, paints them using gouache paint, and then cuts them out, lays them down, arranges them over and over and over until he's happy with it. Then he glues them down and he finishes the images by painting whatever else he wants to add to it. So that's, again, an example over there. That's what you've got. So very practical, right? Because if you don't do something like that, if you just paint a fish and then you decide you don't like the way it looks, you don't like the way it's pointed up, down, in, out, whatever, you got to crinkle that one up and start all over again, right? Well, he didn't have to do that because he had the freedom to move it around on the page before he finalized it. So that's how he made them. That's how he made the first one. So after 8 Familiar Fish, they start doing a regular series. Now he's gotten a lot of attention from the fish, and they have this momentum started with these series of prints. And the next thing they do for the next couple of years is they create this series of 24 prints, which were called the Horseless Carriage Adventures. And so here the idea is, again, in line with the theme of the magazine, they're encouraging people to go see the natural wonders of the country and, of course, do that in their cars or automobiles, right? So there's 24 of these. 8 were actually made into prints. The other 16 were not. They just appeared in the magazine. But a unique feature of them is there's automobiles in every single one of the 24. So we have this one's called the Winona tree. It's a giant redwood where they cut out the center of the tree and you could actually drive through it. And that print's right over there. So that's one I particularly like. And so here's the Here's one of the Horseless Carriage series articles, and they've got the Lookout Mountain, they've got White Sands, New Mexico, they have the Louisiana Exposition, Natural Bridge, Niagara Falls, Winona Tree, Grand Canyon, which is over there, and then that is a particular spa, I think. Saratoga Springs, that's what it is. So, so they do this for 2 years. They do all these travel destinations, and like I said, 8 of them actually ended up being prints. These 8 are actually available as prints. So we have a Grand Canyon, we have White Sands, New Mexico, we have Lookout Mountain, Winona Tree, Niagara Falls, Natural Bridge, and then the 2 Louisiana Exposition and Saratoga Springs. And if you look carefully at each one of these, there's a car in every single one. There's an automobile. They're not modern cars, they're older cars. They're kind of nostalgic, vintage cars. But there are cars in every one, and again, the idea is hop in your car, go see something, and wear your car out, so you need another one real soon. So these are just some of the other pictures that didn't make it into print form. They're part of the series. This one down here with the guy floating in the water, that's West Palm Beach. So that's close to home. And then this is the last group of them. Down here on the right, you see Old Faithful, Alamo up there. Pikes Peak is here. That's where the car's going up the steep mountain, etc. So these are all of the remaining Horseless Carriage series prints. So now comes the exciting stuff. Now comes the good stuff. Charley is asked to do a series of bird prints. And he's not necessarily famous for any birds, or it wasn't a focus of his, but the editor came to him and said, okay, let's do some birds. Let's do a series, because we've got this momentum going. We had the fish, we have the Horseless Carriage series for 3 or 4 years now, and it's taken off. People love this stuff, and you're selling prints, and it's good for everybody. So what I want you to do is create a series of 10 birds. The theme is backyard birds. So if you're looking out your window at the bird feeder, these are the birds you might see if you're in the right part of the country. So he does a cover, and that's the cover. I think one of the 4 Times magazines that I circulated, yep, there we go, is coming around. And that's a very famous issue, because that really got him started with the birds. And another aside here, so he worked in collaboration with E.B. White. Does anybody know who E.B. White was? Yeah, Charlotte's Web. So he's a famous children's author, and he worked with Charley on this particular article. He did the bird descriptions. If you read the article, there's descriptions, these colorful descriptions of each of the birds, and those were done by E.B. White. So there are 10 bird prints. They're all quite nice. But again, here you can see this minimalistic style, this minimal realism, right? We can see this bird up here. We know instinctively it's a chickadee. There isn't a lot of detail, but it's got a black cap, it's got a white mask on the face, it's got a yellowish belly. It's a chickadee, right? We don't even have to think about it. Same thing with the purple finch, same thing with the downy woodpecker, same thing with the brown creeper. Tufted titmouse, cardinal, northern cardinal, white-breasted nuthatch, and song sparrow. Oh, so now he's still doing the same thing. Here we are 4 years into this. He's still doing the same thing. He's making these in his garage, and he's selling them. People are writing into the magazine and requesting them, sending in their $5. Or I'm sorry, he's at $4.50 now. He's lowered the price. They're $4.50. Sorry, slipped my mind. But the bird prints are actually a little bit bigger than the fish prints. If you just look at the scissortail flycatcher over there versus the fish, he actually is using a larger format for the bird prints. So you can buy one or you can buy all 10, but they're only $4.50 a piece. It's such a hit that they decide, hey, we're going to do this every single year. So for 7 years in a row, Charley comes up with 10 birds, each one in a different theme. So in 1954, the theme was backyard birds or bird feeders. In 1955, it was a farewell to wings, which is about migration when the birds in the north come to the south, etc. In 56, it's 10 western birds, so these are birds that we wouldn't see here, but some really colorful ones like green jay. America's Vanishing Birds, this is a interesting series. I haven't talked about it much, but Charley was more than just an artist, more than just an illustrator. He also had a strong social conviction, a strong social conscience, and you can see that in the shirt I'm wearing, where it says "Warming Warning." It's about, it's from the, it was an image that he did for the Bird Center in Ohio, and it's about global warming decades ago. So I told you he's an ecologist, conservationist, whatever. So he did America's Vanishing Birds in 1957. So some of the birds that are extinct, like the Carolina parakeet, for example, and some of the birds that were close to extinction, like the whooping crane, for example, are included in that series. It's a great series. Then in 1958, 10 southern birds. And it's in blue because that's the title of my second talk. I'm going to give another talk somewhere down the line here, and it's all about the 10 southern birds. These are the birds we see down here. So purple gallinule is one, for example, limpkin, whippoorwill, some birds that you don't see in other parts of the country. So if you're interested, if you like this style, if you like the birds, if you like this talk, then there's another one coming, and I think it's great too. American Bird Architects is my favorite series of his 10 bird series. American Bird Architects is all about the nests and family behavior of these 10 birds. So you can see a couple of them here in this shot. The indigo bunting here, that's that bluebird, has a very characteristic nest. It nests in the fork of a tree, and usually there's 3 prongs to the fork, and they build their nest in a certain way out of certain materials in that notch or crotch of the branch. The bank swallow up here in the upper right, very it's an abstraction of what they do. They drill a hole in the side of a vertical bank, so a river bank or something, they'll drill a hole. In the middle down here on the bottom, barn swallow. They make their nest out of mud and feathers and grass. So that's American Bird Architects, and for my money, that's the best of the bird series. And then there's the American Bird Census. There's 10 more birds, which are also quite nice. So he did that for 7 years in a row. 10 birds every November for 7 years, and they're great. And they did that because people loved them, right? If they didn't have a good response the first year, they wouldn't have done the second, or the third, or the fourth, or fifth, sixth, seventh. Between 1952 and 1960, he made over 100 of these so-called Ford Times images. They appeared in the Ford Times magazine. Birds, fish, insects, places, and he was just really quite prolific, right? 100 of them. So over 34 years he worked for this magazine. He started in 1948, ended with this cover in 1982 called Feathered Freeloader. It's a cute depiction of what we call a cowbird, which is a parasitic nester. What they do is they lay their eggs in other birds' nests and then let the adoptive parents raise their chick, who usually crowds the other chicks out of the nest. So here you see some yellow warblers raising a cowbird chick. It's the big one there, because it's gonna nudge those little warblers right out of that nest and hog all the food, and so it's a parasitic nester. But that's what the Feathered Freeloader is all about. During that period, Ford Motor Company had other publications as well. They had the Lincoln Mercury Times. It was the same kind of format, but it's, they're upscale cars, the Lincolns. they had a magazine called Forward Farming for farmers. They had another publication, didn't come out monthly, but I think it was once or twice a year, the Ford Almanac. He illustrated all those as well. So over 30 cover illustrations, over 90 articles, and over 100 4x prints. Just before his death, he was, quote unquote, discovered on a national scale. Has anybody heard of Todd Oldham? Yeah, there's somebody in the back who's heard of Todd. So Todd Oldham is kind of like a fashion designer. And he's got a loyal following, and he's got a lot of design sense. And he discovers Charley. And he works with Charley to put together a book. It's called Charley Harper, An Illustrated Life. And this was a humongous book. It's like 12 pounds. It's a huge coffee table book. There are smaller versions of it available now, but the original one is, I think, like 12 pounds. It's a huge coffee table book, and it captured work from every phase of his career. And I've just shown you the 4x part of his career, not what happened after that. But this is a picture that was in the Wall Street Journal of 4x prints that were in Todd Oldham's apartment. And so Todd discovers Charley, he publishes this book, and everything just goes crazy. People start collecting his artwork. And it becomes harder and harder and harder to find as the years go by. Today it's very hard to find these 4x prints, much less ones that are signed. What we find is these 4x prints were made in the 50s, and Charley was not thinking about money back then. He was just trying to make people happy with his artwork. And so he was selling these things in different venues. People would come to his home. People would write in. And so his prints they didn't really keep track of them. He wasn't thinking like a businessman. He was thinking like an artist. Oh, somebody likes my print, I'll send them one. So a lot of these aren't signed. They're not numbered. We don't know exactly how many there are, but his son swears that his dad said there's no more than 200, and sometimes less than 100. So somewhere between 100 and 200 of each of these designs were ever issued. And when I first met Charley's son in 2007, I started working with the Harper estate. And I can't remember exactly who told me this, but somebody at the organization told me, we're thinking about throwing all these away. We have stacks of them, but they're just in cupboards. We're using them to line cupboards. We're using them like placemats. We really don't think there's a market for these things. They only cost $4.50 anyways, right? And so, I'm scratching my head thinking, no, this is really nice stuff, and at the same time, what was starting to happen was there's kind of like this mid-century modern revival going on, or just starting, where people are thinking back to their childhood, especially boomers, and so they're buying furniture like crazy. They're decorating in mid-century modern, and this stuff fits right in with that kind of decor. So all the stars lined up for a revival of these things, and they just started going out the door like crazy. But they were ready. They were this close to just chucking them in the garbage, and they didn't realize really what they had. But Todd Oldham did. Todd recognized this, and he latched onto it, and he started An Illustrated Life. He published that, and then he published another one with even more of Charley's artwork in it, called Animal Kingdom. Not to be confused with the first one by that name. I found this on the internet about a month ago, maybe a little longer than that. And as I was preparing this talk, I said, I gotta show this one, right? This is eBay. And this is one of those prints that was from the Bird Feeders series, you know, that cost $450 back in 1954. Somebody bought that thing for almost $8,000. Almost $8,000. That's how rare these things are and how hard they are to find and how crazy people are about collecting his work. That's how passionate they are. They'll pay $8,000 for a print that size. And this one's signed, so you know that adds to the value, but I'd never seen anything like that. It's the highest price I've ever seen for one of his prints. Is there a question?
Did the original survive?
Charley's son has a lot of the originals.
So what about the glue that he used?
I have no idea. I think it's some kind of rubber cement.
'Cause that can be
That one there is not, it's not falling apart.
But is that an original?
That is an original. That's one he did by hand. He cut out the pieces, he pasted them down, he painted the net and the fins and the fishing fly. Yeah.
Anybody wants to check it out, 2 weeks ago, last night, Antiques Roadshow, I don't know whether it was Idaho or Utah, had Parker prints on them. And there was an original that went for 13 and some prints that went for 8.
Yeah, I believe it. You get in some of these auctions, you see these auctions, people get carried away, they get emotional, they don't really have much restraint, maybe they have too much money, who knows, but yeah, it's...
We had the same boss.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Arthur Luigi was
Oh,
boss.
really? Okay.
And he was my boss.
Oh, fab. Did you work at Frame House?
No, I was in the...
Or no, you were at you were at a different...
No,
organization.
after Arthur retired,
Okay.
he went into public service and I worked for him.
Oh, how fascinating. Well, let's chat afterwards.
I will, yeah, because I think if you get in touch with his family, they might have stuff. 'Cause
Yeah.
his wife was an artist, so I'm pretty sure that he's got to have
You know, once in a while people...
Parsons Field made.
Yeah, once in a while people do call me up and they say, hey, I used to work at Frame House Gallery. That was in Italia. This is a different... He's talking about Arthur Luigi.
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 Yeah, he was very sensitive about that.
I'd never met the gentleman, but he was the editor for the Four Times
Yes,
magazine.
for a long time.
Yeah, for many, many years. And
He was his boss.
yeah, he was Charley's boss. That's exactly right.
Like Forrest Gump.
No, that's great. I love the observation. I always love learning more. There's, you know, in 60 years, so much happened, and like I said, I never met him, so I'm still learning about the guy. It's great. But this one caught my attention, almost $8,000. Actually, with shipping, it's over $8,000. So, you know, just by comparison, that's better than the stock market for the last 70 years. You know? If you put $1 in the stock market, it'd grow 11% every year for 70 years. You'd have a pile of cash. So that's a pretty good return. That's the end of my talk. I'm Terry, and my company is charleyharperprints.com. You can also type in charleyharpergallery.com, and I own about 10 other domains. But I'm going to give another talk called 10 Southern Birds, and it's all about the birds that we see down here and the 4 times prints from that series. And thank you for your attention. If there's any questions, you can ask them now or just come up and talk to me later. It's fine. Yes?
I'm just curious, is the Cornell Labs that you mentioned the one that has the birdsong app?
Cornell Labs has a couple of apps. One is, you know, they created a thing called eBird, and they have an app called Merlin. And so if you're a bird nerd like me, you have Merlin on your phone. And Merlin is this cool thing. If you can, you can imagine, it helps you identify a bird, even if you can't see the bird. How does it do that? It listens through the microphone to the bird song, and it says, oh yeah, that's a tufted titmouse. It's also got pictures and other diagnostic aids to help you identify birds. So yeah, Cornell Labs has that. Well, thanks again for coming and supporting the gardens. You have a wonderful audience, and you're greatly appreciated. Thank you.
you so much, Terry. If you have not had the opportunity, we welcome you to go into the gallery and gift shop area. You can see more of Charley Harper's work. We invite you to come back. We have even more of his art that will be going up. We've been a little delayed by the storms, and so and it takes a little while to get each of these pieces up, so we will be adding more and more to this exhibit. And like Terry said, he will be coming back to us to have another talk. So we really appreciate you coming out this evening. Have another glass of wine, have a few more snacks. What's that? Oh yes, Mr. Bill over there is reminding me, we have Orchid Ovation coming up December 5th. We welcome you all to that. If you have not secured your tickets, back on the drink table there is a QR code that you can register, or I've sent out some emails and you're welcome to do it that way, or you can go through our calendar on our website. It's a beautiful day that we have a luncheon. It'll be out here under the beautiful tent, and you'll see one of the samples of our beautiful centerpieces that will be out on the tables that day, and we will be having plein air painters that will be throughout the gardens. So that's very exciting, and the entire day is all in support of our educational programs. So we appreciate you coming out this evening. Thank you so much. And let's give Terry one more round of applause.
Thanks, Tom.